ETV Ghana, your world of quality entertainment.
The third in the series of engagements with high-ranking diplomats on the fight against COVID-19 in their current country of residence features Her Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, Ghana's ambassador to Italy. She shares with us Italy's COVID-19 experience on the Happy Morning Show.
You're also tuned in to Happy 98.9 FM, and the show is the Happy Morning Show. This morning we have a very important discussion. We are heading straight to Italy for the experience of Italy during the COVID-19 pandemic, and our guest will be joining us in a bit to bring us up to speed with everything that happened in Italy during the COVID-19 fight. As of today, this morning, Italy's case count stands at 234,998 infected cases. 33,899 deaths have been recorded, the second highest in Europe. 165,830
in our news. In fact, the mnemonic
262 active cases are now being dealt with by the Italians. Joining us on the discussion this morning and joining me as my co-moderator, I have Abdul Mumin of ETV, and he will also be joining us in a bit. But a good time for us to introduce our guest to you this morning. Ambassador Eudora Quartey-Koranteng is a product of Achimota School and the University of Ghana. She holds a degree in sociology. She is a lawyer with over 40 years experience at the bar and a member of the management teams that set up and operationalized the Ghana Stock Exchange and the Ghana Leasing Company. Amongst the several other positions she's held, she was appointed the Director General of the Deputy Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) in 1998. Prior to her appointment as Ghana's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to Italy, she operated her own legal consultancy. Your Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, buongiorno and welcome to the Happy Morning Show.
Buongiorno da Roma, tutti. Boy, that is good morning to all of you from Rome, and I'm happy to join you this morning to discuss how COVID-19 played out in Italy.
So, improper disposal of.
We're also very grateful to have you on the discussion this morning. And let's start off on a personal note. The discussion on COVID-19 shifted from Wuhan in China to the Lombardy region in Italy. Italy suddenly recorded a surge in infection numbers and recorded almost 1,000 COVID-19 related deaths in a day. Reading all these statistics and watching how the situation unfolded in Italy, what were your thoughts and what was the feeling like for you?
Before I address this question, let me thank you, Raymond, and your network and GTV for this opportunity to share the experiences in Italy. Indeed, it's been quite an experience professionally in the midst of the crisis, how to get our work done, our mandate as representing Ghana in Italy. And beyond that, on a personal level, how to keep focused and be able to discharge my mandate with my team. We were able to stay on course by God's good grace through the support of prayers and constant calls from relatives, loved ones from far and near, which enabled us to keep, let me say, an even keel. In addition to that, we had the support of our Honorable Minister, Honorable Shirley Ayokoboche, and of course with the support of His Excellency, the President, Nana Addo Dankwa. And there's nothing like having the support of your boss when you've been given a difficult job or difficult task to discharge. And it's very reassuring that they had our back all through this crisis. And let me say that I think I can stand in for all my colleague heads of mission and their respective teams, wherever they are, to show our appreciation for the support we got to take us through the crisis to where we've reached today. Having said that, one then would ask, yes, the question you asked, what were my thoughts? What were our thoughts? I will liken it to the beginnings of a thunderstorm. You're sitting down quietly or somewhere and you hear a rumble and you think, oh, there's a storm coming. The rumble came from Wuhan in China. But we had lived through SARS and bird flu. So we believed that with that experience, the science would have things in place so that the potential crisis would be dealt with. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because this virus was new. The science hadn't quite got the nature of this particular virus to understand its modus operandus, to know how virulent it could be, how infectious it could be, how mobile it could be, penetrating through the population. And that is what has ended in this global pandemic that we're going through right now. So our thoughts were initially not so much of concern that, oh, it will be dealt with. But as time went on, even WHO realized that they had to call it a pandemic at some point.
Your Excellency, Italy, we all know, is credited with having some of the best healthcare systems in terms of infrastructure, healthcare professionals, and medication. And Italy appeared to be well prepared when COVID-19 began to spread outside China, to the extent that Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte was confident Italy had put in place a system that was the most rigorous in Europe. Italy, again, we all know, were the first country to ban flights from China into Italy. As early as January 31st, immediately after a Chinese couple tested positive in Rome, Italy had started taking steps to deal with the pandemic. From 3 cases as of 15th February to 41,035 infected cases as of March 19, with 3,405 deaths, surpassing China's total deaths, making Italy the new epicenter of the virus at the time. How did the virus spread in Italy? How did the virus get out of hand in Italy?
One has to say that it didn't get out of hand in the sense that there was negligence or lack of oversight in the Italian system. Let me stress that Italy is known to be a country that has a very high level of Medicare. And this is a product of its social and cultural environment. Italy is family oriented, and the role of grandmas, grandpas, the elderly is very much recognized in the social environment of Italy. So Italy's Medicare was developed in such a way that life expectancy was increased. So as a result, there was a very high proportion of the elderly within the society, because the elderly will come with their particular issues, not because they are unwell, but because they are older. So immunity and ability to be able to withstand the ravages of a disease like COVID-19 posed a problem for the elderly. That was number one. Number two, Italy has a very well-developed disaster response mechanism. This was born out of a disaster that occurred in 1980 when the Epena earthquake struck. This was an earthquake of 6.9 magnitude. And the challenges that Italy had to go through for the rescue operations from that earthquake made them realize that they needed to develop a very good disaster response mechanism. This can be found in their civil protection agency, which they put together to provide adequate responses to any disaster, whether it be earthquake, tsunami, medical, any kind of disaster that would hit Italy. So the Civil Protection Agency can be described as not an institution, but a function, because it brings together all the competencies needed in any disaster situation, and they work together to ensure that in any disaster situation, the appropriate measures will be put in place. And I dare say that is what gave the Prime Minister, Mr. Giuseppe Conte, the courage to say that Italy was well posed to deal with the crisis. But unfortunately, at the beginning of the eruption of this pandemic, nobody or the science hadn't quite realized the nature of the virus, how virulent it was, how it could penetrate the populace, and how it could be dealt with. Let me backtrack a bit to what you said earlier about the first 3 cases. If you trace how the first 3 cases landed in Italy, there was a couple from Wuhan. They landed in Milan. So you can imagine they were already infected. They were on a plane from China to Milan. We'll say maybe 200-300 people on the flight. So all those people were exposed. They landed in Milan. From there, they walked about the airport and then took probably public transport to Verona. From Verona, they moved to Parma. From Parma, they came to Rome. So if you track their movements, if we're going to do contact tracing, you can see how they were busy, unknown to themselves, shedding this virus all through the northern part of Italy. And that is where the problem came about. So by the time they arrived on the 23rd of January, and they were hospitalized, I think, on the 28th of January. Italy, I said, has a very good medical system. So immediately, with the news coming from China and the symptoms that they were displaying, they were sent immediately to Italy's top infectious diseases clinic. That is where the virus was diagnosed, and they were kept in quarantine for that period. So within the first 5 days, they had managed to spread the virus all over the northern part of Italy. So when we say get out of hand, it presupposes a sort of negative, maybe lack of oversight. But that was not it. It was the nature of the virus so silently being able to penetrate the system. And by the time the virus had been identified and the Italian authorities suspended all flights from China to Italy, the virus was already deep into the Italian populace and continued to spread that way. We know from contact tracing now that it can be spread so very easily. So that is what happened. Meanwhile, one other passenger also arrived from Wuhan in Italy. He also tested positive. He was hospitalized. And within that time, from 23rd of January till I think very early in February, they were those 3 that were hospitalized early enough to be treated, and they recovered. But the damage had already been done. But Italy's rapid response came to bear. Immediately, the virus was identified, and it was traced to these people who had traveled. All Italy's airports were decked out with the thermometers and ultra-red heat scanning equipment that enabled the system to be able to identify anybody who would be coming in with the virus, because they recognized that the virus would certainly be imported. Having dealt with those who were who had been in hospital, it was assumed that they had staved off the spread, but they had walked around so freely in Italy that they had shed the virus, and then it just continued from there. So that is actually what happened.
If you just tuned in, you are still listening to the live discussion on the COVID-19 in Europe, sharing Italy's experience. And our guest is Ambassador Eudora Quartey-Koranteng. And so I'll get to my next question in a bit, but you can follow the discussion on Happy 98.9 FM on Twitter, #HappyHMS. Your Excellency, looking at the number of deaths by age group with respect to data available to us as of 4th June 2020, out of 33,689 reported deaths in Italy, age group of 60 to 90 years accounted for 95.4%, whilst 0 to 59-year age group accounted for 4.6%. Based on the numbers, is the claim by some experts that Italy is a country of old people who have underlying health conditions valid?
Earlier on in my comments, I said that Italy is a family-oriented society. And because of that, the medical system has ensured greater life expectancy for its citizens. grandmas, grandpas, the elderly play a very important role in Italy's social environment. So the proportion of the elderly in the society is a function of the way Italy family society is organized. The older people naturally would have underlying health conditions. The immune system may not be up to dealing with the ravages of this virus as it emerged. So unfortunately, Italy became a victim of its own best practices in having developed a very good medical system. And that became its Achilles heel in being able to deal with the crisis, because the elderly were exposed to the virus within the family setup. I've explained how the virus spread through the system. And if there was an older person at home and somebody who used to go out came home and brought the virus, the elderly, the older ones in the family or in the homes would be most at risk. So at the end of the day, this aspect of Italy's social environment contributed to the massive spread of the disease in Italy.
The issue of lockdown, but let me once again remind the listeners and viewers that we are also live on GTV. And Abdul Moment, if you are here, say hello. Say hello to our viewers and listeners. Abdul Moment is my co-moderator.
Yes, Raymond, thank you very much. A very good morning to all our viewers across the country. My name is Abdul Moment, and this is the GBC News channel, and we are excited to be having this conversation about COVID-19 in Europe, sharing the Italian experience. With us doing this discussion is Ghana's ambassador to Italy, Her Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, and of course, I'm doing this with Raymond Nyamado. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for staying here with us and for sharing the Italian experience with us. Raymond, you take it over from there, and I'll come in when.
Thank you very much, Abdul Moment. Your Excellency, on the issue of lockdown, and lockdown is an issue a lot of Ghanaians are familiar with because we have also had our own experience of lockdown here. On the issue of lockdown, we know Italy started with a lockdown model that was initially limited to the northern province of Lombardy and Veneto, and what was described as a local lockdown. When the spread began in the north, and Italy actually failed to curtail the spread, there was a nationwide lockdown that actually came into force on the 10th of March, described as a quarantine policy. And as of May 4, 2020, the longest lockdown in Europe has since been relaxed as the first stage in their phase gate approach towards lifting totally in Italy. How much of an impact would you say the quarantine policy had on Italy's fight against the global pandemic?
I think we can safely say that lockdown or quarantine is the accepted response to dealing with a massive or crisis infection situation in any environment. The impact of the quarantine certainly paid off in that Italy was initially locked down in the north, which is where the original hotspots were found to be. And this was to be able to contain, when you have an infectious disease situation, the first thing is to contain the incidence of the disease as much as possible. Beyond that, as I've explained to you, the way the virus spread throughout Italy, from the north, unbeknownst to the system, to the authorities, the contact tracing had led to the spread of the disease all through Italy. So by the time the lockdown in the north actually took place, the virus had actually spread to other areas of Italy. So beyond the locking down of the northern territories in Italy, by the time that came into effect, the disease had begun to spread in other areas. The incubation period for the disease, the 14 days, also added to the complication, because if you get infected, you will not know till at least 14 days after you've been infected. So people would be walking around and feeling that, not knowing that they had an infection. By the time the symptoms are displayed, they would have also spread the virus further. So the quarantine that was put in place was not only for the north, but later when they locked down Italy, the country itself was locked down, but region by region, the country was every region was also locked down, so that the medical facilities could be attended, given to the populations that had got infected on a regional basis. So the quarantine certainly did have an impact in containing the disease. But the nature of the virus, and this is something that you find me saying so often, was not anticipated. And the way it spread, it is so silent. And this is something that has come up in all the different countries, Europe, and recently we've seen in the USA, New York, and other states, of how, despite the attempt to contain the spread of the infection, once it's penetrated, we know the nature of any virus. Viruses are unlike bacteria. The virus itself has to run its course. With bacteria, you can treat with antibiotics and kill the infection. But with viruses, they need to run their course. So the problem that came up with Italy was the virus and the curve, as we say. The authorities had not been able to anticipate the nature of the spread. So at any point in time, they seemed to be behind the curve and had to allow the infection to peak. And today, fortunately, we are happy to find that it's peaked, and the numbers are certainly drastically lower than they were at the height of the pandemic as it spread through Italy.
You're still listening to the Happy Morning Show, and this is a live discussion we are having from Italy. Our guest ambassador, Ghana's ambassador to Italy, is Her Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, and she's helping us break down exactly what happened in Italy, sharing the Italy experience. Your Excellency, what has been Italy's real strategy with regard to easing of the lockdown restrictions? And what considerations led to the decision to adopt a phase-gate approach with regards to lifting of these restrictions?
The COVID-19 disease we have seen is not only a health problem, it is also an economic problem. When we started experiencing the pandemic, we saw it as a health problem to keep the citizens safe from further infections. But once the lockdown came into effect, that created economic problems for the society. Most industries and other economic activities were suddenly brought to a halt. So at the end of the day, to be able to put in place the lockdown effectively, one had to strike the balance between the health and safety of the individuals as people, and then beyond that, the health of the economy. And as our president so wisely said, and this quotation has been touted all over the world, that we know how to bring the economy back to life, but we don't know how to bring dead people back to life. So this balance between saving the lives of the people and making sure that the economy would survive beyond the epidemic is something that the Italian authorities had to grapple with. Having put the lockdown in place, needing to wait to see how far the virus would spread before it peaked and come down. And as the numbers started coming down, efforts were made at revitalizing the economy. So it was a question of striking a balance between the health and safety of the individuals and the economy. And let's face it, if you don't have anybody living after the pandemic, there'll be no need to save any economy. So the health factor played in first. And as time went on, it was realized that slowly, the need to identify the areas of the economy that needed to be brought up to kickstart the economy into life. And that is what happened. I'll give an example. When the first indications of unwinding from the lockdown came into play, it was interesting to note that one of the areas that were earmarked for opening up were children's clothing shops. And one would ask, why children's clothing shops? I've said earlier on that the socio-economic situation of every country, and this is again something that His Excellency, our President, Nana Addo Dankwa, said, will depend on the economic environment of every country. So looking at it, this epidemic in Italy started in the midst of winter, the high point of winter. So you can imagine children born towards the end of the year, they're still babies. We are in winter, they're still in winter clothes, and we're anticipating lockdown maybe towards spring. Children grow, and they grow very quickly. So those children will probably not have any clothes to wear to meet the spring temperatures that were warming up. Older people would have their clothes from last year. They would not be growing, but the children needed to come out of their winter clothes. So that was one consideration that went into having the children's clothing shops open up to give parents the ability to clothe their children appropriately as they grow and were outgrowing their winter clothes, not needing winter clothes anymore. So I give this example to show that for every environment, the authorities need to take a very determined look at the nature of the society, how the society functions, and plan the unlocking in such a way that it would meet the needs of the society. In Ghana, our president in one of his broadcasts indicated that Ghana has a very large informal sector. And we know what happened when the lockdown in Ghana was in place, that people who had to go out on a daily basis to earn their living were feeling rather stressed for their inability to do so. So that was the area that the authorities in Ghana had to look at to ensure that they were able to provide adequately for the needs of the society without compromising the health requirements of the society at the same time. So this balance, every authority, every country has to strike that balance and know which areas to unwind from slowly to give the people ability to breathe and come back to earn a living, to kickstart the economy. And that's exactly the strategy that was used in Italy.
8.9 FM and also on ETV Ghana. You can join us on our Facebook page and follow the discussion. Good time to bring in my co-moderator, Abdul Mumin. Abdul Mumin, take over.
Raymond, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Your Excellency, for staying through with us during this interview. We are focusing on COVID-19 in Europe, and Her Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, the ambassador, Ghana's ambassador to Italy, is sharing those experiences with us here. If you just joined the conversation, this is GBC News. It's on Happy FM as well as on ETV Ghana. And then also, if you want to follow us on social media, just visit the Ghana Broadcasting Facebook page. We're streaming live there, as well as on our website and on the social media handles of Happy FM on Twitter and also on Facebook. Your Excellency, first of all, let me find out from you, because you've been talking about the health impact as well as the economic impact, but also even here in Ghana, we have come to be told about a new term called the new normal, where we go out wearing masks. We no longer shake hands like we traditionally have done over the years, and so on. So many other things have changed in our lives here in Ghana. But in Italy, how are people adjusting to the new normal, so to speak, the new way of living in order to curb the spread of COVID-19?
COVID-19 has posed us an evolutionary problem, a social evolutionary problem, let me put it that way. as you rightly said, there's a lot of adjustment that needs to be made. The things that we took for granted, human beings are social creatures. So meeting, shaking hands, hugging, and being close to each other comes naturally as part of the way we live in every society. So it's been a challenge because even at the height of the crisis in Italy, certain hygiene protocols needed to be put in place. And these protocols have been found in every country all around the world as the way we need to go to protect ourselves from infection. So the wearing of masks, social distancing, use of sanitizers, washing of hands is gradually becoming a way of life. It is becoming so in Italy. Now I can see that it's also going to be the same in Ghana. It's being practiced all over the world. So if we talk of what you ask, you even have to ask yourself, what is normal now? Because before we behaved in what we thought was normal. But normal is a function of the situation you find yourself in. And as things change, you have to change and adapt. So the new normal will involve what I see as change, the need to adapt, that's change. It will call for innovation. And we're finding all sorts of different innovative ways of dealing with COVID-19. I see, in Ghana, our Veronica buckets, we wash our hands very often. There's a practice that I know we tend to have in Ghana when we're going to eat. We tend to wash our hands, but we don't wash, we just rinse in water. It's only after we finish eating that we actually use soap. Now, we are being told that the virus is very susceptible to soap and running water. So now we have to wash our hands often, and more particularly when we're going to eat, because part of the protocol for staving off infection is to avoid touching your face, because that is how the virus gets entry into our bodies. So there's going to be change. There's going to be the need to innovate. Ghana, I've said that the cultural norms determine how we are going to face the crisis. Shaking hands, at funerals, there's always a long queue. You have to go and shake everybody's hands. Now we're not doing that anymore. Funerals were big social events. Now we are being asked in Ghana, 25 people or less for funerals. So there's going to be a great deal of adaptation that we're going to have to go through, because the virus is not going to leave us today. So as we learn to live with the virus, we're going to have to make these innovative changes to ensure that we can survive.
Your Excellency, in order to help, for example, Ghanaians to cope with living with what we have described here as the new normal, we've seen even ordinary citizens, provide free masks to the poor and vulnerable in Ghanaian communities. Again, we've seen the government come up with policies such as the COVID-19 alleviation program to help businesses that have been affected in these times to at least break even and so on. But in the case of Italy, what are some of the measures that the government has put in place to help the citizens deal with the virus as it is at the moment?
In learning to deal with the virus, the Italian authorities have moved us into what they call the phase 2 of dealing with the virus. And the name of phase 2 is coexisting with the virus. The virus is going to continue to be with us here, and we're going to have to learn to live with it. So all the health protocols that need to be observed are being enforced. That's number one. Beyond that, that's on the health side. On the economic side, the government has put in place various social intervention initiatives, one of them being a stimulus package of about 55 billion euro to help revitalize the economy. Italy's economy is primarily made up of SMEs, small family business enterprises. which having had to close down because of the crisis, are going to be found wanting in the ability to come out of the situation again. Italy is a tourist-oriented society, and a lot of the enterprises, these small businesses, are part of the value chain of supplying needs within the tourism sector. If you went to the Vatican, for example, where, you know, at this time of the year, there'll be so many tourists there. The small van seller, like we have kiosks in Ghana, who sell ice cream, souvenirs, those who provide supplies to these different kinds of small enterprises, they all got affected by this lockdown. So at the end of the day, one of the key areas of revitalizing the Italian economy is looking at how to bring, for example, the tourism industry back to life, because there's a very strong value chain in that part of the economy. So for one thing, Italians love their summer holidays. If you come to Rome anytime July, August, it's almost a dead place. Everybody's gone off somewhere, to the beach or somewhere else. Now, Italians are being encouraged to have their holidays, but to spend their holidays in Italy. If they spend their holidays in Italy, it will act as a catalyst for the local tourism industry. Once that builds up and they are able to get back into circulation, that is one way of jump-starting the economy back. And then also, as I've said, it's a matter of balancing the health and the economic requirements. Being asked to spend their holidays in Italy means that they're not going to travel. We've learned that one of the very key areas of the infection was importation of the virus from outside. So let's try and keep people as much as possible within the Italian environment, so that the possibility of bringing a fresh set of infections from outside would be limited. So as part of their social interventions, not only in dealing with the economic, but the economic has some implications for the health of the citizens as well. So this is, I think this provides the focus of how the Italian government is managing to get the health back in shape and then kickstart the economy.
Your Excellency, in order to save time, I'll box two questions into one so that you may attempt answering both at the same time. First, it's got to do with reactions to the lockdown. Here in Ghana, when the partial lockdown was lifted, on that very night, some persons went out on the streets in wild jubilation. We would like to know, first of all, how Italians received the announcement of the lifting of the lockdown. That's number one. But number two, others are of the school of thought that perhaps we're jubilating in Ghana because we do not think that the virus is dangerous enough. The virus is harmful enough to the Ghanaian and to the African for that matter. How do you respond to these?
Let me take you back to the Bible. When God created Adam, he looked at Adam in the Garden of Eden and said, "It is not good for man to live alone." Adam was in solitary confinement, even though he had the whole of the Garden of Eden to himself. So God gave him a soulmate. The human nature naturally is human beings are naturally social beings, and they need that freedom to move around. Quarantine is another name for confinement. Confinement is associated with imprisonment. I remember when we were young, if you misbehaved, you were sent to your room for a number of days or hours to keep you in solitary confinement. So confinement in any society is a sort of equation to imprisonment. You're not being allowed to be the free human being that God made us to be. So once the lockdown was lifted, certainly people jubilated just for the sake of having fresh air, to come out and be the free human beings that they, by nature, expect to be. In Italy, it was a little different in the sense that the announcement did not come overnight. There was a program set out for the unlocking. So it was on the day of the unlocking for certain areas. If I recall, I think about 2 weeks ago, when the lockdown was lifted, so people could go to the parks and jog around. You should have seen that weekend. And of course, now spring is upon us. We're actually into summer. The weather is so fine. So suddenly people were everywhere, enjoying the fresh air, enjoying the parks, being able to move around. And it was just human beings expressing the relief of coming out. It was just a natural reaction to coming out of the lockdown. As to the fear of the virus, I think I just have to stress for my fellow Ghanaians at home that the virus is very real. The virus is very real. It is particularly virulent. It is a form of virus that I don't think the scientists had expected. The nature of the symptoms. And as I said before, viruses, unlike bacteria, cannot be treated. They have to be allowed to run their course. But it's the symptoms that they create, this particular symptom of this virus, where it settles in one's chest, in one's lungs, literally squeezing the life out of you, because your lungs are what you need to breathe. And for what reason this virus found its way to settle in our lungs is something that maybe once they find the answer to that would help provide the antidote to the symptom. But again, let me just stress that the virus is very real, and people should understand that if the authorities in Ghana, the COVID-19 team led by His Excellency the President, is saying that for any reason they have to lock down again, it is for our own good. I take note of I think the first presentation His Excellency the President gave. If you noticed, sometimes there are little telltale symptoms that tell you the mood of the person. His Excellency the President was in very somber and serious mood. Even his attire, he was in combat gear. He was war ready, because that is where Ghana stood at that time, that we needed to be ready to face this virus that was going to cause such havoc in the society if we didn't get ready for it. And I think he made it obvious to his people that as a leader, it was his role to let them know what was happening, to understand the nature of this disease, and then to carry them along with him. So the transparency with which in the last 10 presentations that he's given us, giving us all the details of why it should be so, he tells us that these are based on the facts. His team, COVID-19 team, brought together all the competencies that they would need to analyze every aspect of this COVID disease in Ghana. The same way that the Civil Protection Agency in Italy has helped the government and the authorities. We have a leader who has been able to lead us through to the point where he could unlock. But it is for us to understand that having come out of the lockdown, if we do not obey the hygiene protocols that are necessary to keep us safe, the disease will penetrate Ghana the same way that it has penetrated other societies that have been ravaged by it. And we may have to pay the price of lockdown again.
Thank you very much. If you just joined the conversation, this is a collaboration between GBC News, Happy FM, and ETV Ghana, and we are having a conversation about COVID-19 in Europe and sharing the Italian experience. I'm doing this together with my colleague on the other side, Raymond. Raymond, take it over from here.
Thank you very much, Abdul Momin. And Your Excellency, before I get back to Your Excellency, let me remind listeners and viewers that, yes, of course, you are listening to the Happy Morning Show. We are coming to you live from the studios of Happy FM inside the Salam Down 98.9 FM is the frequency. And we're also live on GBC News as well. We are live on ETV Ghana, and we are live on all our social media platforms. Facebook.com, Happy 98.9 FM, Facebook.com, ETV Ghana. Your Excellency, let me bring you back home to Ghana. You've been following Ghana's conversation. You've been following the progress of Ghana's discussion with regard to COVID-19. From Ghana's travel restrictions to border restrictions, enhanced contact tracing and testing, to the provision of Ghana Health Service updates on the progress of the nation, to the partial lockdown, Ghana has been the reference point out of her peers when it comes to how we've handled COVID-19 on the continent. And from where you sit, what was the feeling like for you, knowing that your home country was doing so well to control the virus that caused a lot of death in Italy? And if I may ask, were you worried for Ghana at any point as the virus wreaked havoc in Italy?
I will address this question by maybe answering the second part of your question first. Was I at any point worried? As I said at the beginning, it started like a rumble, so there was not much concern at the beginning. But as things unfolded, our concern moved from concern to worry to extreme worry, because I was looking at understanding the way the virus had spread in Italy, and looking at Ghana. I was looking at Tema Station, I was looking at Kaswa, Medina, and Swami, all over Ghana, where we have this very high concentration of people. My own people in Bukum, the Gans, and trying to imagine, should this virus penetrate our environment in the same way that it had done in Italy? How were we going to cope with that? And I can assure you that I worried the ears of many people with such concerns. But let me say that I've already said that His Excellency the President has been a leader we need to be proud of. And there's this story that is told of a young boy who was in a plane. The plane was going through some very serious turbulence. Everybody was saying their last prayers. And this boy was calmly reading his book. And when he was asked whether he wasn't scared, he said, "Oh, my father's the pilot, so I know he'll get us through." So that's the sort of confidence we need to have in our president, who has shown such great leadership. So as he takes us through this crisis, I think we need to be confident that with his leadership, we'll be able to get through the crisis and be proud. And with the comments that have come from different international fora, even the World Health Organization, praising Ghana for what we've been able to do through our president and his COVID team, we need to be proud and to be able to say that, yes, indeed, these are good times to be a Ghanaian. And it's not only about football. When you are out there in international circles, as soon as you say Ghana, the first thing they talk about is football. But now it's gone beyond football. This is a survival matter. And Ghana has been able to take back the reins of leadership in Africa and stood by itself in the world to show that with good leadership, we can also do good things, great things, achieve great things in this country. And we ought to be very proud of our leadership and proud of the name Ghana as this has led us to.
Your Excellency, you've been in Italy all this while, through the lockdown, through government's imposition of the quarantine policy and everything Italy has done with regards to dealing with the pandemic. Are there any experiences, from Italy's handling of COVID-19 that Ghanaians can benefit from and possibly implement, if not already implemented?
Again, I will just take us back to my earlier comment about the Civil Protection Agency. I said that was born, Civil Protection Agency was born out of responses to a crisis, a natural disaster crisis that happened in 1980. A lot of world developments today, technical, technological, medical, have been born out of responses to crisis. Sometimes experience is the best teacher. So as things happen, you ask yourself, what did I do? What could I have done better? What do I need to be prepared for such an eventuality? So looking at the nature of the Italian Civil Protection Agency, maybe with what the President, His Excellency the President has put in place, we'll be able to emulate what Italy has. And it's been my mission to try to get them to share with Ghana how they've been able to achieve that level of disaster response, so that should we, at the point when this disaster, this pandemic is behind us, we'll be able to develop maybe even NADMO and the President's COVID-19 team to the level of the Civil Protection Agency disaster response that we have here. So that is one thing that we could be doing. But there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Most of what we've done in Ghana, I think, have become part of the international protocols for dealing with the crisis. So it is for us to look at our particular socio-economic situations and see how we can adapt those protocols as best as possible to suit our environment.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. We've been speaking to Her Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, and she's Ghana's ambassador to Italy. She is sharing Italy's experience throughout the COVID-19 fight with us on Happy 98.9 FM, ETV Ghana, and GTV as well. Good time to introduce my co-moderator, Abdul Mumin, to take over from me.
Raymond, thank you very much. Raymond, are we wrapping up now? If we are, then I'll know what to say.
Ghanaians are everywhere, we know, but there are quite a few in Italy. The numbers in Italy are set at around 100,000 of Ghanaians in Italy. This number has risen over the last 2-3 years because of the massive migrant situation into Italy from Ghana in the last couple of years. They are made up of, the migrants are mostly unskilled laborers. They tend to move into the farming areas or the industrial areas looking for farming jobs and laborer jobs in the industry, in the industries. We also have students here who have come here on their own volition. Most of the students, I would say 98 or almost 100% of the students are here on self-sponsorship. They are not on Ghana government scholarship. There are quite a few second-generation families here. Also, people who have come here. I know one president of one of the Ghana associations in the south. He has been here for 35 years. So you can imagine if he's been here for 35 years, he's settled here. He's an IT specialist. So we have professionals too here. We have nurses. I've met a few nurses here who are also working here. So we have a very mixed group of Ghanaians providing very good services in Italy. And sorry?
Your Excellency, I asked that question because I wanted to find out. Now, that's a considerable number of Ghanaians living in Italy. Under the restrictions brought upon the world by COVID-19, then naturally the question will be, what have been some of the interventions they have benefited from the Italian government, but also from Ghana's embassy in Italy? Can you share that with us, Your Excellency?
Let me start with the Italian government. Italy has a lot of social interventions in place, not necessarily because of the COVID, but naturally to support its citizens. And so the Ghanaians who have settled here, who have valid work papers and are lawfully registered in the system, have been able to benefit from some of these interventions. At the time the lockdown was put in place, for example, students who were here, maybe not all of them, but some of them who had been able to acquire jobs or had their proper student residences authenticated, were asked to go home, but they were put on a sort of social security, provided social security safety net. Landlords were instructed not to demand rent from March through April. Utility bills were put in suspension just to give them a break because of the lockdown, because their earning power would have gone down. And a lot of Italians too benefited from this social intervention. Beyond that, at the mission, at the embassy, let me say that I am very lucky to have with me a very good professional team of Foreign Service officers. So between us, we were able to put together some measures, though not actually social intervention. But in any crisis situation, one of the most important things is to be able to give the people that you are caring for the assurance that there's somebody looking after them. So we were able to reach out to them and let them understand that even though we couldn't be with them physically, we were there. So we put out 2 emergency numbers through which they could call the embassy, asking for advice, what to do, sometimes just seeking assurance. You just need to talk to somebody, you think somebody who is in authority, that if you ask the question, then you'll be able to tell them, follow the protocols, stay home, and all of that. As part of the lockdown procedures, what the Italian authorities made sure was that access to food and health was not compromised. So supermarkets were not closed, pharmacies were not closed, so long as people obeyed the protocols of wearing their masks and showing the social distancing. So you go to a supermarket, depending on the size of the supermarket, people were allowed in 1, 2, or 3 at a time. It would be a long queue. You go and you are let in. So at least they had access to food. We asked them to stay at home. Currently, as part of this second phase of coexisting with the virus, there's hashtag Io Resto a Casa, I stay at home. The Italian intervention being that even though the crisis may be lower than it was some time ago, the virus is still with us. So as much as possible, we should avoid being busy going up and down. So we continue to work from home as much as possible, and people are dissuaded from walking about unnecessarily. So these are all part of the things that were put in place. And I have to congratulate my team again for being able to put together a system that enabled the mission to work. Even though we were working from home, our emails were working, people could maintain contact with us. We moved the main lines to the telephones of the 2 of the key staff who could take calls that came through the main lines, even though we were home. So anybody needing to get in touch with the mission in any emergency situation would have somebody to talk to. And it's always good to have a listening ear when you feel threatened or under crisis of any sort. So those are the things we were able to do.
Right. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is open to evacuating Ghanaians who are stranded abroad. In Italy, have you received any calls from any Ghanaians asking to be evacuated?
Not really. We didn't have calls in that kind of situation. It's only recently that we've asked people who have been stranded here because of the lockdown, who came here and for reason of not being able to return home on time, have been caught up here to register with us, so that should we have the opportunity to liaise with the ministry, they would be in our records for them to be assisted to get back to Ghana.
Again, very finally, before Raymond comes back into the picture, we're told that Italian law prohibits sharing of information of patients of COVID-19. If any Ghanaian, therefore, contracts the virus in Italy, how will you be able to trace such a person and to ensure that he or she is given the necessary support?
You've answered your own question. The rules of engagement, rules of health, dissemination of private information are very well governed by this principle that without the consent of the patient, the information cannot be divulged to third parties. The information we got was only to tell us that some Ghanaians, at the time we got the information, we were told that 9 people had been hospitalized and were receiving treatment somewhere in hospital, some were being treated at home. But as to their names, we were not given. And until they came, or they would come and let us know that they'd had the disease, there was really nothing much we could do about it. And I think this is a point where maybe I can just make a point about stigmatization. This COVID-19 disease has resulted in a concept of stigmatization. I'm seeing that in Ghana and amongst the Ghanaians here, so that anybody contracting the disease would not want anyone to know that they've had the disease. And maybe this is one thing that we may have to do a lot of public education on, because especially particularly for those who have recovered, because that would demonstrate to the public that you can get the disease. And from the numbers that Raymond mentioned, comparing the numbers of those who recovered to those who have died, I think it's almost times 3 or 4, if not maybe 5. So recovery rate is very high. So there's nothing to be ashamed of if you've had the disease. And I think maybe that is one area that I could recommend that we could focus on and reduce the fear of stigmatization, and let people rather, especially those who have recovered, become ambassadors for showing that you can pick the disease so easily, but you can recover. And when you recover, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you once you've recovered. And until the health authorities are able to determine how long your immunity will last beyond your recovery, people who have recovered are very safe to come back into the society.
Excellency, thank you very much. We are live on GBC News, also on Facebook and on Twitter. We're also streaming live on the Happy FM platforms, on ETV, on Happy FM. My colleague Raymond is on the other side. Raymond, you take it over from here.
Thank you very much, Abdul. And we are still having a discussion with Her Excellency Eudora Quartey-Koranteng, Ghana's ambassador to Italy, and we are sharing the Italian experience, the Italy experience on COVID-19. So COVID-19 in Europe is the discussion this morning, and this is the extended version of the Happy Morning Show. But Your Excellency, you have spoken at length about what Italy has done to resuscitate its economy. And so I will not take you back there, but quickly, what has been the impact of COVID-19 on the Ghana-Italy trade relations? And are there any arrangements currently in place to facilitate trade at state-to-state level or business-to-business level as both countries try to get their economies back on track?
Getting our economies back on track and trade relations would be part of the bilateral relations that exist between Ghana and Italy. Let me say that we've found that there's been quite a lot of private enterprise, private partnership relations between Ghana and Italy. Investments in Ghana, first of all, I mean, if you look at even the construction industry in Ghana, we have Impregilo from the past, and then, recently we had various other companies coming to do business in Ghana. So Ghana has been a very good investment destination for Italian private investment. And I think this would fall in line with the president's vision for Ghana. Ghana beyond aid, Ghana attracting investment. So beyond making sure that Ghanaians remain safe, are safe, the policies that the government, through His Excellency, the President, had put in place are aimed at ensuring that Ghana would move from its basic agricultural format into a more industrialized economy. And the aim of the government, aim of Mr. President, is to ensure that the country is positioned in such a way that at the end of this crisis, Ghana would still be an investment destination. What has happened is just, I won't say an irritation, but it could throw the policies that the government has been following, Mr. President has been following the last 4 years off gear. But I think all the interventions that are being put in place is to assure the investing public outside that Ghana is a safe place to do business. So at the end of the crisis, when things are more stable, it should be able to attract people to come back to Ghana, because in Ghana, we do things properly. As the white man may say, we do things proper. So that is the comment I will make for now on.
We are about wrapping up, and so if you can quickly ask your final question. Okay, Your Excellency.
Stage of your life is a time you have to plan for.
What kind of world do we have post-COVID-19?
Post-COVID-19, will there be
if we would ever get there? Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. Will there be a post-COVID-19? I think taking a cue from what is being done in Italy, we are coexisting with the virus. The virus is not going to go away just yet. So looking at what is happening, first of all, I think the pandemic enabled the world to press a pause button and reassess how we do things. This reassessment will enable us to determine what we need to move forward while we coexist with the virus. It's going to generate, maybe, we talked about the global village before because we were moving here and there very freely. But the pandemic has affected every aspect of life, from our very existence to the way we do everything as we move around this world. So even the WHO has encouraged countries to be less nationalistic and be more cooperative with each other, to share information. When there's such a crisis coming up, we should share the information. As the science is being developed, we should share the information. Innovation is coming up. As you're aware, just recently, there was a competition for innovative ideas coming out of Africa. And the first prize actually went to a young Ghanaian. I forget his name right now, but a young Ghanaian who had developed an app for contact tracing and assisting the COVID centers to be able to direct people who had explained that they had the symptoms to the nearest COVID treatment center, and the information will be taken from there and he would be tested. So at the end of the day, the testing, the tracing, and the treatment policy that the government has in place is one very important aspect of how we are going to deal with this virus while we learn to coexist with it, because it's the only way that we can contain it. Once we're able to identify, test, identify any positive cases, and then move on to treatment, that would ensure that we're able to keep the virus in check. And that is what will help us live longer to be able to develop the economy the way we need to develop it.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And Abdul Mumin, if you can come in with your final question before we allow Ambassador to take leave of us.
Exactly, Raymond. My final question would just have to be, as we are learning from the Italian experience, before we wrap up, what are some of the most salient lessons that, as a Ghanaian representing Ghanaians in Italy, you would want to share with us, those back in Ghana, so that we do not go down the way Italy went down at some point?
Yes. I did say at the beginning of our discussion that what happened in Italy was actually a direct function of the nature of the virus, which hadn't been anticipated in the early days. But now that the virus has been ring-fenced, in the sense of the science knowing how the virus operates, again, as I said, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. WHO has said that right now we need more cooperation and collaboration internationally. Countries should share information. So as we look around to countries that have been through the kind of crisis that Italy's been through, I think the sharing of the information would be very useful. And whatever we've done in Ghana so far, I think has been gleaned from what has international best practices for dealing with the crisis. And so as we have in place a very active and competent COVID-19 team, I would not presume to give them advice, because from what has been happening so far, and from all the presentations that His Excellency the President has given the nation so far, one can see that the competencies within the COVID-19 committee are providing all the necessary information that they need to provide Ghana with the necessary responses to the various aspects of this disease. And again, we talk about not only the health problem, the socio-economic problems, the psychological problems. Here in Italy, one example that has come up recently is that they have a hotline. As I said, the human nature, we are by nature social beings. Being clamped up in the house, people have developed all sorts of mental health, psychological issues. So they have a hotline for people to call in to ask for help for their mental issues. We're lucky maybe in Ghana because of the nature of our social networking. The lockdown may not have dealt us that kind of psychological blow, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist. So of course, we need to look at some of these things and develop the appropriate responses to all the aspects of what COVID-19 has brought out, so that we'll be battle ready, just like happened in Italy. If anything is to happen again, we'll be ready to deal with it.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. This is GBC, Happy FM, and ETV. Raymond will wrap it up for us.
Thank you very much, Abdul Mumin. Your Excellency, we would like to say a big thank you to you for taking time off your busy schedule to be with us this morning. Sharing the Italy experience has been insightful, and we are very, very grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Raymond and GTV. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share. And let me just say to Ghanaians that we're lucky to have the leader that we have. The virus is real. But if you do happen to catch COVID-19 and you are taken in for treatment and recover, it is not something to be ashamed of. What we have to do is to follow the health protocols that we are being asked to put in place, because that is what will save lives. And to stay home and obey whatever directives that will be put out for us to follow to ensure that we stay safe. And if we stay safe, certainly we will live to see tomorrow to let the economy develop beyond the expectations that the president has in mind for Ghana. So God bless Ghana. Thank you all. Arrivederci.
Grazie, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Eudora Quartey-Koranteng. We appreciate your time on the show, and we'd like to say a big thank you to the team that helped us put this together, your political team, or your team of support, your strong support team. We'd like to say a big thank you to them as well. And we'd like to send greetings from Ghana to everyone in the embassy this morning. And we hope to see you in Ghana sometime soon when the restrictions are lifted.
Look forward to seeing you all too. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. This has been the Abdul Moment.
Yes, Raymond.
Your final words.
It's been an exciting conversation with the ambassador to Italy. She has opened the windows to Italy for us to understand the behavior of the virus, its impact on the health of the people, but also on the health of the general economy. And she has shared with us ways that we can avoid getting to that point here in Ghana. And she's also brought to the fore what the embassy in Italy is doing for Ghanaians. And then when we asked her the question about the evacuation, she said they haven't received any particular requests from any Ghanaians to be evacuated. I think it's been a very enlightening conversation, Raymond, and we are glad that we're a part of this collaboration.
Absolutely, Moment. And you have rightfully summarized everything Your Excellency said. And we'd like to say, once again, big thank you to the entire production team, big thank you to GTV, big thank you to ETV Ghana, and a big thank you to Happy 90.9 FM for bringing this to us. And for everybody who was wondering exactly what was happening in Italy, I'm sure you have been able to get your answers from this morning's discussion and with regards to what the Italian government has done and what they are doing in order to get back on track. You've been told everything by Ghana's ambassador to Italy. And so, till we meet again on our next edition of the COVID Diaries, this has been the extended edition of the Happy Morning Show. We've been coming to you live on ETV Ghana, on GBC News as well, and also on all our Facebook platforms, Happy 989 FM, and also ETV Ghana. We've been live on Facebook. And so, till we meet again, I say be good and have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
ETV Ghana, your world of quality entertainment.